I took this job, single mom with 2 kids who were teenagers. Took the job, fired, absolutely devastated. When you're fired from a job and you're living in absolute terror and the survival of yourself and your children are at risk, it's amazing how you will have acts of courage. Like you hear of people when there's a car accident, of somebody picking up a car to save their baby.
Mm.
It's kind of like the same thing. I promise God, if you tell me what to do, I promise you, I will dedicate my life to helping people. If you keep waiting till you know exactly what you're going to do, you might be waiting a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to have a leap of faith and trust that there's a divine hand watching over you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Busy Moms Get It Done podcast. My name is Esther Shittu, and today I am super excited to welcome Merry Korn to the podcast. Merry is the founder of the Pearl Interactive Network. Merry founded Pearl Interactive Network in 2004 after a hard season in her life, which she's going to get into right here. But she's grown the company. It is now a 1,300 social enterprise, and she's also the author of the book Fire to Inspire, Fired to Inspired, a memoir about her journey. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're so welcome, Esther.
So I was very intrigued by your story because it picks up at the moment when you were working at a job for 2 months and then you got fired. Walk
Yeah.
us through what happened then. What were you thinking when it happened? How did you get fired? And how did it lead to a journey of you finding your business?
You're asking very good, probing, thoughtful questions, and I'll give it to you in bites and then pause so you could ask or respond. So in 2004, I had, up until then, I'd been on a job that some of your listeners could relate to. I had well overgrown it. And so I just needed a change, and I took the first job that came along. And that was my first big mistake because um, I believe, Esther, we all have a mission. And if we're not doing work that connects to our heart and our values, it's not going to be very successful. And I blame myself. I never should have taken the job in the first place. So anyway, I took this job, single mom with 2 kids who were teenagers, took the job, fired, absolutely devastated, and honestly thought my children and I would be living under a roof. I was terrified. Uh, so should I walk you through what happened and then how I went from devastation to building?
What happened? You took the job. How did you get over that fear of like, I just lost my job, my source of income as a single mom? Did you have something else? Did you have anything to fall back on? Did you have people to help? How were you able to pull yourself out of that?
I still today am amazed because you know how hard it is just being a mother, and then
Yes.
compounding that with not knowing how you're going to feed them, let alone send them to college. Um, so if you think this is too woo-woo, I'll back off. But I had a lot of spiritual awakenings on this journey. So here I'm fired, totally devastated, scared out of my mind. Really pictured that bridge I would live under. And then I took a
Yeah.
walk. I took a walk in an alley, and in that alley, I prayed like I've never prayed before. And I said, okay, God, here it is. I am on my knees. I am begging you. Uh, I, I'm begging you to tell me what to do because I'm lost. I knew I only had to my severance and my unemployment ran out, and then I was pretty much done.
Mm.
And I made a deal with God, and I said, and I'm not getting religious. This is just believing there's a higher power. And I said, okay, here's the deal. If you just tell me what to do, just tell me what to do. And I promise you, I will dedicate my life to helping people as lost and as afraid and scared as I was. And Esther, I sold the business, so I no longer own it, but I sold it. And I'm still carrying forth the message of helping people who are lost, confused, overwhelmed with finding out what they're supposed to do with their lives. So I prayed, and I heard an answer. And the answer
Hmm.
I heard were the two words, medical associations. And I'm like, what? And this voice said, yeah, medical associations. I immediately went home and I started to call the CEOs of every Ohio Medical Association. And
Wow.
I started to ask them not for a job because I knew if I asked them for a job and they didn't have one, they wouldn't return my call. I asked them to talk to me.
Hmm.
So I started getting on the phone and I started to schedule between 4 to 6 to sometimes 8 informational interviews a week with CEOs of medical associations. Within 6 weeks of doing this, one of the CEOs said, I can't hire you, but I need a company that will call sponsors and raise money for us, and I'll pay you a commission. So, Esther, that was the birth of Pearl Interactive Network and the company that I eventually grew to 1,300 employees.
Wow. And so when you called those companies, you got someone to actually, how many companies did you end up calling in total? And you got someone to call you and say, well, I don't need, like, I'm not hiring, but I need you to do this, right? How did you deal with maybe imposter syndrome or of like, I don't know what, were you trained before to do what he was asking, or how did you end up training yourself and going forth in that sense?
Esther, when you're fired from a job and you're living in absolute terror and the survival of yourself and your children are at risk, it's amazing how you will have acts of courage. Like you hear of people when there's a car accident of somebody picking up a car to save their baby.
Mm.
It's kind of like the same thing. You're so afraid to fail, and failure to me would be my kids being hungry and under a bridge. Um, but I've always been spiritual, and we're not talking religious. We're talking about just this faith. Um, there were times I doubted it, but some way, somehow, in the darkest moment, I knew I would eventually be okay. But the fear never left me. I mean, I started this business. So getting back to the number of calls, I made cold calls. So for every person who agreed to talk to me, I left 8 or 9 calls. And 1 out of every 10 or 2 out of every 10, the CEO would answer me and agree to a call. And I didn't care how many said no or didn't respond back. All that mattered is the ones that said yes. And the approach I had was not, I'm looking for a job, but could you just guide me on how do I use my skills and talents to satisfy a need in your industry? And that technique is called an informational interview. And for your listeners listening to this call, on my website, I have 3 workbooks, free 3 workbooks on the website Fired to Inspired. One is how to overcome fear. One is to find your life purpose. And the third one is to do exactly what I'm sharing with you, which is making outbound calls to get informational interviews, to talk to somebody in an industry that you think you could love and resonate with. In answer to your question, for every 10, 12 calls, I would have 1 or 2 people say, yeah, I'll talk to you. So it's a numbers game.
Wow. Uh, I wanted to know, like, so you started it with that one. How did it grow to the 1,300 to you being able to sell it and for it to be acquired by others?
Esther, that's a fabulous question. Okay, so this is what happened next. I had the CEO of a medical association say, look, I'll hire you and I'll pay you a percentage, but you have to raise the sponsorships. I did not know what I was doing, but that didn't stop me.
Mm.
But what I did do is the math. So no matter how much I raised, I would never be able to afford my kids. So that's so like I said, there's been a God thing all along the way. And remember, in the alley, I promised God, if you tell me what to do, I promise you, I will dedicate my life to helping people as lost as I am. So I realized I could not afford, so I realized I was starting a business, but the problem I had is finding people who would be willing to make outbound cold calls to raise money. And so at first, nobody I hired would stay because no one wanted to work on commission. But then the man who was my fiance and became my husband said, you should give this woman a try. Her name was Linda. She was a quadriplegic who lost use of her legs and her arms. She couldn't get out of bed by herself. She couldn't feed herself. But her mind was good. And she was my first employee.
Wow.
And Esther, she made outbound calls and raised $140,000 for that association within the first 4 months.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God, I think I'm onto something. So I started hiring more and more people who were blind, paraplegic, quadriplegic, because they had this work ethic and they wanted to do work that most people would never want to do. Pick up the phone and make cold calls. So I got to 10 employees, and then this divine hand came. And out of the blue, I get a call from the Rehab Services Commission of Ohio. They told me they had an $80,000 grant. Okay, so Esther, I wasn't even looking for it. And they said they wouldn't give me the money, but they would give me the tools I needed to keep hiring the most disabled populations to work, because people with disabilities have an atrociously low employment rate. If you're hearing impaired, it might be 5%. If you're blind, it could be a 15% employment rate. So when they asked me what I wanted, I said I wanted laptops, I wanted someone to help me recruit, and I wanted software technology that enabled people who are blind or paraplegic to do outbound phone calls from home.
Mm.
And they gave me everything I asked for. And Esther, I never stopped being afraid. I was always terrified. I was always scared. And to answer your question, I never knew what the hell I was doing. Pardon my French. But for your listeners, if you keep waiting till you know exactly what you're going to do, you might be waiting a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to have a leap of faith and trust that there's a divine hand watching over you.
No, that's awesome. I wonder though, like, a lot of people might be listening to this. I want you to dive into that informational interview that you said you went to and what that process looks like. And what do you think it would look like in today's environment? Because it's definitely a little bit different. We have AI and we have all things going on. So what would it look like if I am a mom who wants to bring in extra income, or I am a mom who's working but wants to switch into my field, or I'm a single mom? What does that look like particularly?
Okay, the informational interview, before you do the informational interview, it's really important for you to know exactly what you want to do.
Mm.
And that, so these workbooks I have on my website, each one of them is designed to help you through each phase. There's one on overcoming fear, and then there's one finding your life purpose. So Esther, you asked a great question. You're a mom and you want to make money. Are you clear at this stage of your life of what work totally excites you and the work that you feel like God's put you on this earth to do?
So you're talking about purpose, right?
I am talking about purpose.
Yeah.
Do you know your purpose? Do you know what kind of work brings you great joy?
And if you don't know what kind of work brings you great joy, what should you do? Like, because
Okay.
a lot of people are like me, Andrea, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So like, how would you move beyond that if I don't know? What if I don't know?
Okay, so Esther, one thing I highly recommend, because it's free, is on my website. There's a workbook called Finding Your Life Purpose.
Hmm.
And the workbook, it's free. but it forces you to look at anything you've ever done since you were a kid, like signs of things that thrilled you, excited you. So for me, when I was a little kid, I used to love to play teacher because I loved to be a really kind, sweet, compassionate teacher. So it asks you different phases of your life. What were books you read? What were movies you saw? What was even volunteer work? Even work you might have done with a grandparent or an aunt. Maybe it was taking care of a grandmother that you loved, or maybe it was taking care of children. But before you do the informational interview, download the workbook because it will ask you all kinds of clues that will help you unravel. It's almost like a complex puzzle that will tell you finding what you're meant to do is like putting together a complex puzzle. But this workbook will ask you all kinds of questions that will give you clues about what you're meant to do. So Esther, just by virtue of the fact that you're doing these podcasts, if you didn't love what you were doing, you wouldn't be doing them. Look at things you do as a volunteer without pay, because that could give you an indication of what you could get paid to do and love.
Yeah.
You're asking so many great questions because the concept of how do you overcome fear, find your life purpose, and once you know what you want to do. So let's use you as an example. Esther, how many podcasts have you done?
Oh, wow. More than 30.
How many listeners do you think you have?
I don't know, but right now we're nearing, on Podbean alone, about, it's small, but 500.
Okay, that's a start.
Yes.
The point that I'm making is if I told you you had the ability to make a living off this podcast, what would you say to me? How much would that thrill you?
That would be great. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's say I was working with you and we discovered you. Why do you, by the way, why do you love this podcast that you do?
Well, you're interviewing me now. I love it because I love hearing the stories of moms. I love hearing people's experiences. I've always been like, I love stories. So this is a story to hear people's stories to kind of help other moms who are like stuck, and want to keep going even though they have kids, but also know that like it's okay. You know, sometimes seasons and sometimes you go forward and sometimes you just slow down.
You already know. So you're 10 steps ahead of everyone because I mean, I struggled for years and years. You at least figured out what you love. Now what you have to do is figure out how to make money. And one way to make money is through sponsorships.
Yes.
And
You're
one
telling
way,
me what I know.
oh, right. But you see, the informational interview is a tool for either finding a job or creating a business. And so the same technique I use to make outbound calls to get contracts to raise money is the same technique you could use if I said, put together a list of potential sponsors that want to get in front of 500. Do you have any forecasts for how much you're going to grow?
No, I don't know. I haven't really paid attention to that.
And do you have a business plan?
No, I don't.
Okay. Esther, I don't, first of all, you got it off the ground without thinking about it too much.
No.
And that's,
I
but
didn't.
that tells me your heart and your passion is here. And then if you could work on a mini business plan, just 2 or 3 pages and put your vision on paper, like what is your vision? Would you like to do many more? You have to finish doing a business plan because that will be your roadmap for first what it is you're going to do, how you're going to fund it, and what does a sponsor get. So what a sponsor gets from you is ears and listeners that will possibly buy their product. Esther, there's a way to do it, I swear to you. But it begins with you taking the time to do a business plan and quantify how you're going to raise sponsorships so that you're going to support yourself. And I swear to you, there are so many resources. It begins with your business plan and researching it. But I was just on a podcast today And he had like 3 commercials on that came and went in not even a 20-minute podcast. And
Yeah.
the reason why sponsors were willing to pay is because they want to get in front of the demographics of who listens.
Mm.
So who's your demographic?
Moms, working moms.
What ages?
I don't know. I think it's like between 25 to 50. But basically
Okay.
moms who are in the trenches of like raising their kids and working or not working and just raising their kids and figuring that out.
So you went on and you did research for your business plan and you asked what kind of sponsors would want to get in front of my listeners. You're you're probably going to be flooded with a list of different sponsors that would pay so that when I came on, they would have an advertisement for their daycare center or
Mm.
their babysitting service or their diaper service. Um, I swear to you, Esther, I'm just telling you, I know you could do this.
Thank
We
you.
connected for a reason, but this is, Esther, it's more than just you, it's your listeners. The
Yes,
point
yes,
being
that's what I was
is
gonna say.
you asked a perfect question, which is, well, what if you don't know your life purpose?
Mm-hmm.
One way to find your life purpose is to do informational interviews with anyone doing anything remotely like you think you would want to do. So for you, it could be the most successful podcasters and ask them if they would take 10, 20 minutes of their time that you could interview them to learn how do you navigate to make this a business and financially viable.
I think that's what you're basically saying is to just take it a little bit away from me for a second is that for
Yeah,
anyone who is listening that it's more about like what are you interested in, right? And then
yes,
what when you see what you're interested in, looking for the people who are doing that thing what you're interested in and like
yes.
reaching out to them and just kind of picking their brain. So basically what you're mentioning is like networking, but right and like reaching out on like a LinkedIn on whatever and figuring out what do I trying to figure out would this be the best fit for me, right? So you're saying that basically it's a networking strategy. What do you do after the network though? What do you do once you've done the information interview? What is the next step? What was the next step for you? I mean, your information interview led you to find the opportunity, which led you to find the next opportunity. What did you do next after that?
Ever so I by the way, I have sample scripts on my website. If you pull down the workbook, it gives you sample scripts and it has you think about making a list of all the people doing the work that you think you might be interested in.
Mm.
And it's a very simple script and it's so simple. Hi, my name is Esther. I love the work you do. I'm following your podcast. I would love to schedule just 15 to 20 minutes of your time to understand how do you do what you do. And Esther, it's not about finding a job or getting a contract. It's
Mm.
about learning and developing a relationship. And that's where the magic happens. Because let's say you call a podcaster who is somebody you admire. They're like you, but they're Oprah.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's say you talk to Oprah and you're fearless and you connect with her and you say, I just want 15 or 20 minutes of your time. The workbook will have you think of different kinds of questions. For you, it'd be, how did you get started? How did you get sponsors? Where did you begin? What advice do you have for me? And do you have other people who'd be willing to talk to me? And in answer to your question, Esther, you follow up and you follow up and you follow up. Every time you see an article they might be interested, you send it to them. Anytime they suggest you never end a call without asking for who else you should talk to. Because if you keep following that trail, you're going to find that you will, if you just don't give up and you're fearless, you will eventually talk to people that help you on your course.
Mm.
But Esther, you've got the advantage because you already know exactly what you love. You love exactly what you're doing. You just have to figure out how to make money, and you can.
Thank you. I love that. I think what I kind of hear you saying right now is like you push forward, w
Always.
always push forward and always connect to connect to connect and never stop, right? And it's basically like don't give up, right? I have asked someone this though once, and which is like, how long will it take that I'm trying to go in the same path but I'm not finding success? What would you suggest?
Esther, your purpose of doing the informational interviews based on this short discussion would be to learn how you can make money doing this so that you could be a state. I'm sorry to use you as an example, but it's a
No, 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 go ahead. I'm fine with it.
Esther, but it's a perfect example because you at least
Yeah.
know what you want. That's half
Yes.
the battle. So the answer to it is if you follow the path in that workbook, and you could always text me or email me because I'm happy to help. But if you have clarity of what your questions are and you go down the path of interviewing people who are already very successful and going down the path of scheduling informational interviews with people who could be your sponsor. Because Esther, once I launched my business, I used the technique of informational interviews to get my clients.
Mm.
So if, let's say, you pull down the informational interview workbook and you put it upon yourself to call every daycare center within 25. First of all, is your podcast listened to locally or is it national?
I'll have to, it's like all over, basically in the East Coast though, from what I've seen in the numbers.
So if you were to contact heads, so you're, okay, the people you want to have informational interviews with are heads of marketing that control marketing dollars because they would be your sponsors. Your assignment would be to find out who is the vice president of marketing for the host of types of businesses that would want to get in front of your market. And you have it, and your informational interview would be asking a series of questions of, I was hoping you could share with me how my podcast that reaches this demographic of women is this the demographic that you're looking for? And if it's not, if my size isn't big enough, what size of audience would I need so that I could start working with you to get a monthly sponsorship? That you could use the technique of informational interviews to find your sponsors. Because that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what I did. Esther, when I did the informational interviews with the associations, you better believe when I got one association as a client, I kept after every association I could find that eventually, and more and more and more became my clients because I gave them what they needed. I was able to produce revenues they could not get any other way. You're able to produce an audience that marketing firm, people who lead marketing, they need to get in front of your listeners. Does this make sense?
It does make sense. I'm definitely learning and I'm definitely growing. I wonder though, how would you say, what would you say to those who say, well, does it shift in terms of, what do my question have to do with, you know, there's a lot of fear, not only the fear of like, are people going to listen to me, but there's also the fear of the economy and how the economy shapes and shifts. And you started your business over 20 years ago. You've since sold it. How did you have to, pivot regardless of the different economic times that you went through in those 20 years?
So, um, Esther, when I started to grow my business, suddenly, you know how I told you I heard this voice that said informational interviews?
Mm-hmm.
I heard another voice and it said over 1,000. And I'm like, what? And I knew I wanted to have over 1,000 employees. And the work we did, by the way, was call centers.
Right.
And the association business was not going to get me to my big, big dream. What was going to get me to my big, big dream was going after government contracts.
Mm.
Because government contracts, I was able to offer highly competitive jobs with benefits. And Esther, I swear to you, the same technique for informational interviews with associations worked with government contractors. Hi, I'd like to schedule a time to meet with you and understand how I could do call center work for your agency or for your company. I did not stop doing informational interviews to grow my business till pretty much the day I sold it.
Mm.
It's if I had called and said, hey, I want to sell you this service, nobody wants to be sold to. And
Mm-hmm.
Esther, if you call potential sponsors, let's say you found out who the marketing director was of a diaper service. If you called and said, I want to sell you something, there's a really good chance they won't take your call. But if you said, I just want to understand, how do I leverage this audience, the profile of my audience, to get paid sponsorships that will pay for my programs. Would you just spend a few minutes, just 20 minutes talking to me about how do I position my podcast to be a revenue generator? Esther, those are the kind of questions you would ask for potential people who make decisions about being a sponsor on your program.
That's awesome. That's gold material right there. It's like you're shaping your question not as a what can you do for me, but what can I do for you kind of
Yeah,
way.
but you're also saying, give me advice. I'm
Yeah.
searching. And I think people are basically kind. And yeah, some people won't talk to you, but if you, and by the way, you said something that you picked up on right away. When I started doing informational interviews, I'd use the phone only.
Mm-hmm.
But in the last 10 years, I just did LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is a lot less scary than outbound calls. And right now, if you make outbound calls, if people don't recognize your number, they're not
They're
going to
not
take
gonna
your
pick up.
call.
Yeah.
But the beauty, and you'll find this when you download the workbook, if you do your homework on a potential sponsor, you do all of your homework on what the business is. You do all your homework on that one person that you find that makes decisions on sponsorship dollars. Esther, I'm telling you, if you follow the formula, you're going to succeed because all you're asking is for a conversation. You're not asking for a contract, but if they express an interest, you can always say, let's schedule a time. When you get a call scheduled with them, you ask to schedule time where you could put together a sponsorship kit of what they would get. And honey, then you're in business.
That sounds awesome. What would your advice be for women who are like, okay, this is like sounds good. I want to try this. What is your next step that you think that they should take?
Okay, I'm going to answer for you personally, and I'll
Okay.
answer for your listeners. For you
Okay.
personally, you already overcame the fear to do what you love. The fact that you're doing this with no pay, that tells me you're doing exactly the work you love. You're passionate. And Esther, the more successful you are, the more people you're going to reach with your purpose. And your purpose comes, I know this is going to sound honky tonk, but your purpose, you have a purpose of answering questions to women just like you.
Yeah.
This is why you're here. And the more successful you are, the more people you're going to reach. So my advice to you is get the workbook, force yourself to go through it, come up with your scripts, come up with your list, and go to town. And be fearless. And I'm not even saying make calls. I'm saying start with LinkedIn. And by the way, you have my email address, so anytime you have questions and you get lost, and your listeners, I can be reached on LinkedIn or on my website, www.firetoinspire.com. So for your listeners who are not as far along as you are, because you already know what you want, but the ones who don't know what they want or they're paralyzed with fear, look at the other workbooks. They're free. And they'll guide you for exercises on how to overcome fear and move on, find your life purpose. But you're already 3 steps ahead, Esther. You at least know what you want.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you so much for coming on. And please, 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 everyone, please go Inspired to Inspired, right? Is that correct?
Uh-huh. www.firetoinspire.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for listening. And please feel free to reach out to Merry. And I'll be sure to check out that workbook because she gave me some very actionable insights. Thank you, and we'll see you next week on Busy Moms Get It Done.
Joy, keep up the good work.